Hi, folks. So I wanted to take a second and show you how to find sources for literary analysis on Galileo. So the best way to do this is either to go in through the dashboard on, if you were to Google GTC dashboard, go down to find Galileo. Instructions for that are available in Blackboard and term materials in that folder, tips and tricks for our course, and then research tips. So you could do it that way, or you could just log in to Blackboard and you'll see the little Gwinnett Tech Library and Galileo link over here. All right, so we're going to just use this one to make it a little bit easier. So there's a few ways that you can do literary research. Wow, the librarians are very insistent. So let's scoot them away. But that does bring out a great point, which is we can chat with librarians if we need during normal business hours. So keep that in mind if you need help with anything, right? If it's something that's super library specific, I mean, I can probably help you with most of the things that you need to work with, but for other classes and things like that, definitely ask a librarian. They're really great, honestly. So you can scroll down and you can go down to English over here. You can go to English 1102, 2130, or 2110. And you can do this that way. If you would choose to do this, you would click through there, go to practice researching, and then choose one of these options down here. Now, I am going to actually suggest that we do something a little bit different, which is to just go down to Galileo down at the bottom here. Okay, and the reason that I say that is because this will help you search through everything on Galileo rather than just the limited databases that are available through that LibGuide. Um, so for my example, I'm going to be finding sources on Beowulf, and the reason that I chose Beowulf is because it's European literature. It's not something that would conflict with anything that we're doing in our class. Okay, so you can see my search history here, but let's take a look and see. Okay, let's just start off with kind of assessing really quickly what we want to argue. So in the paper that I'm going to create for a sample, I'm going to be arguing that Beowulf fights Grendel's mother, right? If you don't know the story, Beowulf comes in to help the Yeats fight Grendel, right? Who comes in and kills all their warriors and things like that in the middle of the night. So Beowulf comes in to help them out, and then once Beowulf kills Grendel, Grendel's mother comes to take Grendel's body. Okay, and Grendel's mother is just a small part of Beowulf, but she's definitely something that interests me. And the reason that she interests me is because she behaves in kind of two different ways, right? So Grendel's mother um, in the space, like the social space of the Yeats, is very she's very not very, but she's feminized. Okay, and in the social space of her own private area, she's much more masculine, right? So I want to kind of think about the difference in those spaces in terms of Grendel's mother, right? So that's my overall argument. So let's just start off with the basics. All right, so Beowulf, and I'm a big fan of Boolean connectors. Okay, so and is just going to suggest that I want sources that contain the word Beowulf and this next thing that I'm going to put, which is going to be Grendel's mother. Okay, notice that I put it in quotation marks, and the reason for that is instead of searching Grendel and Grendel's mother, right, because there is an implied and when it's just a space, it's actually it makes Grendel's mother a search term on its own. Okay, and the interesting thing is that works for Google too. So if you're ever searching something that is multiple words and it's just fighting you, put them in quotation marks and then see what happens, because that may help you. So for this, we're now finding sources that contain the term Beowulf and the term Grendel's mother. All right, so let's see what we've got. My internet is a bit slow, so I apologize for that. But let's kind of see what comes up. So the first thing I want to do, you notice that there's about 2,000 entries here. Cool, but the first thing I see is a periodical. Right? Periodicals are not actually really helpful for us because they don't tend to go as in-depth as we need to get. So what I'm going to do is go down to this limit to area, And I want to limit to full text because, let's be real, if I can't see the source, I can't use it. And then I want to limit to scholarly or peer-reviewed journals. Now, note that clicking scholarly peer-reviewed journals doesn't necessarily guarantee that something else won't creep in, okay, which is why you can't just say to justify something being scholarly that you found it on Galileo and that you use that limit to function. You'd have to actually dig in just a little bit more, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. Now, I also want to point out that we're able to use sources written in the last 20 years, right? We want to see what people are saying now. So we just sort of drag that little slider along. And of course, I dragged it not quite right. So we just make sure it's 2000 to 2020. And we've got a bunch of stuff, but see, we've narrowed down to 256 sources. So that's a much more manageable number than over 2,000. So let's take a look here. So I'm talking about gendered spaces in Beowulf, right? And arguing that Grendel's mother is, she utilizes attributes of both genders, okay? So we see this one here. Beowulf's poetics of absorption, narrative syntax, and the illusion of stability in the fight with Grendel's mother. Well, that doesn't sound like it interacts, but let's take a look down here, which is a good, like a part of the abstract. Okay, so we see the article re-examines Beowulf's formal elements to position the poem's audience, particularly in relation to action and time. That still doesn't sound quite right, but we don't see the whole abstract here. So let's click through just to be sure. Okay, so we've read that first sentence. Topics discussed include absorption, denial, dynamic exemplified by the lay of the last survivor in Beowulf, and a discussion on the passage in Beowulf that embodies fight with Grendel's mother. You know what? All of this is super based on Beowulf, but I don't want to talk about Beowulf. I want to talk about Grendel's mother. So this source is not going to work for me. All right, so let's scroll down. So we've got this here. So let's see, how many heroes are there in Beowulf? Rethinking of Grendel's mother as a Glockweef. And a Glockweef is a word that you most likely wouldn't recognize. It's an Old English term meaning warrior woman. Okay, so let's check this out here, because I already know the term a Glockweef in my mind from my reading, and I know that that seems like that might interact with my ideas well. Okay, so we see our abstract down here. So we see that since the Anglo-Saxon heroic society was male-dominated, already on the right track, women were relegated to a position of comparative mediocrity. However, Old English literature does contain instances where women often proved their prowess and ferocity through martial exploits. I can tell at this point that this is something that's going to be helpful. But then I notice this next phrase in this paper. And what I should be thinking at this moment is, bing, 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 here's the purpose of the paper. This is this person's thesis statement. So in this paper, I argue the case of Grendel's mother as I try to rescue her from a status of enforced marginalization as a monster who is not even given a name. I know that this is working with some of the ideas that are currently kind of percolating in my mind. So you know what? I've decided this is perfect. I'd like to work with this, or at least read it further to make sure that this is something that can work. So let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download it, right? PDF full text. I'm going to click that. It's going to come here, and I'm going to download this guy, because the one thing that I've learned about technology is that you can't rely on it to always be there for you. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are downloading any documents that you may want to interact with in the future. Okay, just so that you can have it as a backup. Just throw it in a desktop folder, and then you're good to go. So we're going to hit this download guy. I'm going to title it with the author's name because I'm weird like that. How many heroes are there in Beowulf? Boom. Okay. So I'm going to save it as a PDF. It's now wherever I wanted it. And then notice that we have this list over here. Okay. Right here, this little yellow piece of paper is actually the citation for this source, which is awesome. So we're going to click cite. And you notice we start off with Brazilian national standards. Now, that's not actually going to help us because we don't use that. We use MLA, right? So we're going to scroll down here, and we've got this citation here. So I'm just going to right-click and click copy, okay? You can always copy using the shortcut keys if you want, but the thing you want to pay attention to is that you don't want to paste using shortcut keys, and there's a reason for that. What you do then is you will open up a Word document and you'd paste it in there. Let me kind of pop that open for you. There we go. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste special. On a Mac, that's what it says. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it as rich text formatting. And you see it looks a little bit different here than it did in Galileo, right? There's no hanging indent. And so what I want to do is, well, first off, I noticed that my font is a little bit small. It's the wrong font itself. So we're going to change that. And then guess what we're going to do? We're going to include the hanging indent. Okay, to do that, all we do is right click, we click paragraph, and then we go to indentation, this middle section, special, we change that to hanging. Okay, and boom, now we're good. Okay, and so that's basically what we want to do for each of the sources that you need for this this assignment, right? We're creating a works cited page here in this particular part. So, you can go back onto Galileo and you do the same thing, right? You check to make sure that this particular source seems to be working with your argument. You check the abstract to see how that's going, right? And then there's one more step that you want to do that I haven't shown you on here, and that's mainly just because it's a quick search, okay? You want to look up the author's name and see what university they're associated with. Because remember, for these sources to be scholarly, they have to be someone who is an expert in their field and who is also writing for other experts. Now, you're basically, if your source is an academic journal, you've already checked out that last part, right? We know that it's written for others who are either experts or learning to become experts in that particular field. But we just want to make sure this isn't a regular Joe Schmo, writing from his parents' basement, okay? And the way that we do that is just a quick Google search, right? Remember, academics like to show off their accomplishments, so you'll be able to see which university they're associated with. You'll probably also be able to get a copy of their resume because a lot of professors and things post their resumes on the web page that's afforded to them by their university. Okay. Now, one last thing, don't forget the other important stuff about a Works Cited page, especially when this is your only submission, right? If you're only submitting a Works Cited page, there's a few things that you need. One is a title, so that's going to be titled Works Cited. And we also need to double space this. Now, if this is the only thing you're submitting, just a Works Cited page, you also want to do the normal basics, where you include your last name, you include my name, your class, whatever that class is, and then the deadline date, right? So if the deadline date is the 1st of June, 2020, right, you want to format it like this. It goes day, month, year, okay? So keep that in mind. And then you just include a header. So you double click up here and you insert your page number on the right, so it's perfect. And then you go to right alignment, you also insert your last name. Now look, this font is a little bit off, so we're just going to Control A to select all and just change that, and we're good to go. Okay, and then you do this for each of your sources. All right, so that's how you would use Galileo to find your citations and to access the information that you need. And if you need anything else, please definitely let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.